I recall being held down against my will, having my pants removed.
I kept my mouth shut for a decade before I told a single person.
Public and brave confessions from Colorado residents abused by priests in other states.
The priest begins to touch me outside of my pajamas. Then he begins to go into my pajamas.
Tonight, Contact 7 investigates a lack of faith in the ongoing review of Colorado's Catholic Church, which some survivors say is an attempt to bury the truth.
They need to suffer the consequence of their crimes and go to jail.
Investigations in other states have led to arrest and significant public accountability. Why not here?
Chief investigative reporter Tony Kowalewski has spent months digging into this issue.
It's his story
I recall
of what happened in New Mexico.
being held down against my will.
Luke was a 12-year-old altar boy.
I remember screaming for him to stop and begging for him to stop, and then everything went black.
Now I pretty much look at all the priests as possible pedophiles.
She says it happened inside a Kansas church. She was 10.
He took my hand and he had me touch his
I kept my mouth shut for a decade before I told a single person.
His story of abuse happened in Massachusetts.
The priest begins to touch me outside of my pajamas.
Michael was an altar boy in middle school.
Then he begins to go into my pajamas, so he is fondling me.
You're 13.
I'm 13. Yeah, I'm 13.
3 courageous survivors. Their allegations of priest abuse happened in other states. But as longtime Colorado residents, they are closely monitoring as Colorado's Catholic Church finds itself under the microscope.
Last year, I made a public promise that the Archdiocese of Denver would be transparent.
Colorado's review was essentially a handshake agreement between the Catholic Church and the Attorney General, a civil review, not a criminal investigation, and significantly different than the tidal wave of investigations that preceded it across the country.
Today, Pennsylvanians can learn the extent of sexual abuse in these dioceses.
Pennsylvania's Attorney General used the power of a 2-year grand jury investigation. It uncovered, quote, widespread sexual abuse of children. The numbers were shocking. 300 priests spanning 7 decades. The Attorney General's investigation discovered a systematic cover-up by senior church officials in Pennsylvania and the Vatican.
For the first time, we can begin to understand the systematic cover-up by church leaders that followed.
Aggressive investigations followed in nearly 24 states.
I'm sure this took a lot of people off guard.
The Houston Archdiocese named more than 40 priests, all credibly accused.
I'm not here to gain the cooperation of the Catholic Church. We're here to gain records for a successful investigation and prosecution of a criminal defendant.
And that's the significant difference. In Colorado, no grand jury investigations, no search warrants, no raids by men and women in windbreakers, and no surprises.
I read the terms of the agreement, and it's a joke.
Tom Doyle is a former priest and a longtime critic of the Catholic Church's handling of investigations into clergy misconduct. He's also a current critic of Colorado's ongoing review.
I think it's a farce. And I think it's a farce because it's cooked up mainly to benefit and cover for the institutional church.
Would it be accurate for us to report that you didn't get everything you wanted from the Catholic Church in this negotiation?
Yes, it would be accurate.
Now, former Attorney General Cynthia Kaufman started the negotiation with the Catholic Church and its attorneys during the final months of her administration.
There were some painful compromises that we had to make to get to a final agreement.
One of Kaufman's priorities was an aggressive social campaign to publicize a hotline for victims. A similar hotline in Pennsylvania has produced more than 1,900 calls. In Colorado, since February, the hotline has produced only 33 calls. Finding it requires navigating to the AG's website.
What's your understanding of what happened with the hotline here in Colorado?
I would like to have seen a more robust effort to get that number out.
It's another attempt to bury this, to prevent any more information from coming out, to prevent, discourage victims from coming forward.
There are also questions about decisions to potentially sanitize language in the final public agreement.
When you saw the final agreement didn't include the term secret files, what did it say to you?
Well, it said to me that the church had put its spin on the terminology in the agreement.
Secret files are known in the Catholic Church as Canon 489 files, ultra-sensitive, highly secret documents that include sexual crimes committed by clergy. Colorado's church agreed to turn over the files for the investigation, but somehow the term secret archives was removed from the public agreement.
Sanitizing it only makes the church look worse. So if they're concerned about their image, they're not doing themselves a favor by playing these games.
How do you answer critics that are saying what's happening right now in Colorado is not significant?
I've got limited criminal justice authority. I will use the authority I have as effectively as I can.
Colorado's Attorney General explaining the significant difference between Colorado and states like Pennsylvania. Colorado's legislature hasn't given the AG the power to criminally investigate the church like we've seen in other states. But Weiser says, despite the legal limitations created by lawmakers, he remains confident the review of the Catholic Church will ultimately produce accountability.
We know there have been cases of abuse here in Colorado. This is a chance to name names and to have a full accounting.
Requests to interview Archbishop Samuel Aquila were declined. In a statement, the church says it has turned over all secret files to investigators and points out the church voluntarily entered into the agreement for the purpose of providing both justice and healing.
How do you want this to end?
I want to know what we don't know. I think that's as important as knowing what is there in the files, what is missing, and where do we need to look next? Because I don't consider this an ending point. I consider it a beginning.
The ongoing independent investigation is being led by former U.S. Attorney Bob Troyer. His credibility has sparked optimism in the outcome, and we are told the review should wrap up by the end of October. Now, if you were victimized by clergy in Colorado, you can call us here at Denver 7. You're also encouraged to call the Attorney General's hotline, 720-508-6003. One other note, I was raised Catholic and served as an altar boy. That makes this reporting difficult, but important.
Good summation of
Certainly
the whole
is.
thing. All right, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Very much.